up, our little honeydews, and welcome back to Sippin' and Bitchin', where the drinks are icy and the book talk is spicy. We are on episode 9, part 5, and if it looks like we didn't change clothes from part 4, it's because we didn't. It's the same day. That's how we're doing it this week. Where are your main bitches? And I'm Sam.
That was a lot of words.
It was a lot of words. I regret every second.
Ooh. I'm Steph. Yeah, we are packing a punch so that we are. I would say we would be ahead, but we're not going to be ahead. We're just going to be on time. Giving you some episodes. Ideally, we'll get through another 4. We'll probably hit episode 20 or chapter 23, 24 by the time we're done with this episode. Hopefully,
we might finish by Thanksgiving. Who knows?
That's fine. We have plenty of time till the next book anyway. But speaking of next books, let us know what you would like us to cover, because we do read other books in between these episodes, and we do little reviews on
our Instagram and TikTok
and Instagram. If there is a specific book series or book or type of book or anything,
it doesn't have to just be fantasy. We read like regular romance. We dabble in some sports romance. Me more than Steph. It's not her cup of tea, but I'll read it.
I was like, I don't know who's dabbling. It's you.
We read historical fiction. But yeah,
if there's something you want us to react to, let us know.
Yeah.
Like we've done in every chapter, every episode thus far for this book, I am going to read the note to the reader. So let's dive right in. This book contains themes and or discussions that some readers may find difficult to read. While there are no graphic scenes, there is mention of sexual assault, suicide, the death of children, and discussions of verbal, psychological, and physical abuse. If you need to talk with somebody about your experiences, there are people waiting to help, and I will provide those resources in the description of this video and this episode. It's always heavy to talk about because we're getting into like the nitty-gritty of it all too.
We are.
Just a little recap. Colas has brought Sarah to Delos, Misadeo. I don't know. However I'm pronouncing it.
Misadeo.
Exactly. To make a deal. And chapter 19 is diving into the deal. And Sarah, Colas is shocked that Sarah didn't have anything to say. He's like, you have nothing? And she's like, nope. So then he lays out his deal. I will not punish you or my nephew for what you have done.
We get to get into the nitty-gritty of his BS.
Yeah. She's like, what we've done, you held me against my will, you imprisoned Nyktos. And he said, you manipulated me, likely believing that with her soul inside you, you would be able to kill me. And he says, I imprisoned my nephew for attacking me and killing another primal, and you claim to want to be at my side. It is not my fault I believed you. And he goes, thank the fates you were wrong. But as I was saying, I will not seek to punish you or my nephew. Those who conspired with you, however, will need to be punished. They cannot go without justice. But you may live out your existence as a primal of life with my nephew, ensuring the balance remains. And he says the realms will continue on as they have, except it will be under the rule of the primal of death as the king. And she goes, the primal of death has never ruled. And he goes, nor has the queen. And she's like, well, fuck me. He had me there. Which, accurate though, to be honest.
Yep.
And he's like, all you have to do is give me what I want. And she's like, Satoria's soul. He says, bring me the star. That is all you have to do to prevent war. And she kind of just stands there for a moment, kind of processing everything. And she's like, well, why should I believe you won't go back on this deal the moment you have what you want? And he says, a deal is an oath, or Aiden advises that a deal is an oath, one that cannot be broken. Doing so would force the realm to rectify. Which, I'm kind of interested on how the realm would rectify. Like, I know, like, clearly, like, things are happening, but, like
we know, is it kind of like when a primal dies, that ripple of power is felt? Like, it's something as extreme as that? Like,
unclear. And then Aiden's like, well, what's your offer?
What? Also, real quick, by doing so, the realms will be rectified. So it doesn't say it cannot be broken. It's really it shouldn't be broken because something bad would happen, and we already know Colas doesn't care about bad shit happening.
But also, maybe this is part of his grand master plan.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Aiden says it cannot be broken, but technically it can. Just saying. Continue.
Well, it's technically not breaking it because something's just going in its place. So, like, I see what he's doing on a technicality. Semantics,
should-
really, at this point.
If the array want it to be, you cannot do this, you can't break it, they should make it like Harry Potter when you make that oath and unbreakable vow, and if you break it, you die. But no, it's just the realm has to pay for it. Anyways, continue.
Yes, because we need Jennifer to just kind of rip that one from, Harry Potter. Anyway, Aiden is like, what is your offer? And she's like, wait, what? And Aiden's like, he has offered a deal. You must now offer him one. And she's like, oh shit, I wasn't prepared for this. Holy crap, what am I going to do?
Aiden did a great job at telling her what was going to happen.
Yeah, no, he said, follow your instincts. Let your conscience be your guide. Anyway, and she's like, I need to discuss with my king first. And Colas is laughing in her face and is like, you're speaking to your king. And she's like, no, my king is Nyktos. And Aiden's like, you must offer one now. He's like, take your time. So she's like sitting there freaking out, trying to come up with something.
As
and this
one
is what
would.
correct. She thinks about it and she goes, you can keep Dalos, but you will not rule. You will remain as the primal of death, but you will have no authority over Elysium, the Shadowlands, or the mortal realm. You will renounce the throne and not seek vengeance against any who have stood against you. And Colas is like, is that all? What's in it for me? And she goes, balance will be kept and you will get to live out your existence. And he goes, Satoria? And she's like, my deal does not include Satoria because you a baddie. And that's
yeah,
right.
you don't deserve her.
Correct. And she goes, you don't want war, neither do I. Colas is like, I'm not sure I believe that. Your nature is not at all that different from mine. And she's like, I'm nothing like you. And he says, that's what you want to believe, but I've seen you as you truly are. I know the kind of violence you're capable of. And he says, you believe that because of what I did to you? And Colas is like, no, I know it because of how eager you were to slay Evander. Let's, rewind back up to that moment in that book.
Do we have to?
It's all manipulation at its core, to be honest. And she goes, do you accept the deal or not? Colas is like, you haven't accepted or rejected mine. And Aiden's like, you don't need to do that right now. Neither of you do. You both have time to think it over. And he's like, and Colas is like, that is true, but do you really need time? And she goes, do you? And then a really tense moment. Essentially Colas is kind of like pinning her in a very not great position, kind of triggering her, trapping her, making her feel
he's using an ability on her that we have not seen before.
Correct. Aiden is like, you know the rules, Colas, and he's like, I'm not violating a single one. He's only speaking to her. And the ancient's like, and that could not have been done as you were before. And he's like, it could. And then he's being really creepy. And he's like, I could have punished you for the lives you took when you were here as a guest. And she's like, a guest? And he goes, I could have punished Nyktos more severely for killing one of his brethren. And for attacking me, his king. I would even be within my rights to punish you for your blatant disavowal of my authority and for calling another king. Wouldn't I be, Aiden? And the ancient goes, you sit upon the throne of gods, but she bears the crown of crowns. Baddie.
Yeah, bitch.
And he's just trying to flex that he could have killed her, but no one really cares. And he was like, I was gentle with you, even pleasing. And then we go into this whole her remembering her trauma, and she goes, there had been nothing pleasing about what Colas had done. I hadn't wanted to feel anything. He'd forced it, but I wasn't there. Colas was standing in front of me. Or was he? Panic surged like a trapped wild animal because I could feel him behind me, beneath me, his arm too tight around my waist and his hips rocking. Every inch of my body was drenched in an icy downpour of raw, sharp fear as I felt that twisted tremor in his arm as he held me. Pressure settled on my chest, causing my breath to hitch as I felt the rapid pounding of his heart against my back, his hand sliding down my side, grazing my breast and clutching my hip. Breathe in. The essence swelled at the memory of the unwanted heat of his bite. Hold. My fingers twitched, tingling. Breathe out. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't do anything but sit there and take it, just as I had with Tavius. Well, all the training. And then Aiden cuts in and says, Colas, that is enough. And Colas goes, do I scare you, Seraphina? And he goes, clearly I do. And Aiden goes, that is not her. You need to calm yourself before Nyktos breaks with convention and shows himself. Because the floor was trembling and shit was getting rocked, respectfully. Because
And she realized it wasn't her, it was Ash's anger they were all feeling.
Yeah, pretty much. And Aiden goes to Colas, using the essence against her in such a manner as unbecoming of someone who calls himself king. And Colas goes, I didn't harm her. Unbecoming or not, I violated no rules, and she's confused. And Aiden explains, the true primal of death can root out one's trauma and what they fear, sending them back to that moment. What he spoke of was similar to what an Onaru could do if an Onaru only manipulated negative emotions and created nightmares. It's I want to say psychic, so that's what I'm going to say. The unique ability associated with a primal, and this one is reserved for those sentenced to the abyss. So she now knows why she was feeling what she was feeling. And Sarah goes, what did you ask me just a moment ago? And Colas goes, I asked if I scared you. And she says, you fucking disgust me. Just like you always disgusted Sotoria. And then Colas goes, I would suggest that you use this time wisely, Seraphina. And then Colas vanishes. He had none to say to that because he a bitch.
Yep.
Anyway. And then Callum's like, you should have accepted his offer. Callum can go fuck himself respectfully. And then they shadow step and he asks, do you want to know how I think the meeting went? And she's like, not particularly. And Aiden goes, I believe it went as expected. And she's like, what part went as expected? Him offering a deal, me having to come up with one on the spot when I should have been warned of such before we got here, or him exploiting what he did? And Aiden cuts in and says, I was not certain that he would attempt to make a deal, but even if I was, advising you of the possibility would have been unfair, which I think is bullshit. In my opinion, like you don't have to tell her what the deal could be. You just have to say he could offer a deal.
Yeah. Just give her.
Like, I'm not sure.
Like, she doesn't know what's about to happen, like what a summons means. You could say, hey, this is the possibility of what could happen. But no, you want to be the most vague ass bitch you can.
Pretty much. And then she goes, you know what's unfair? Whatever the fuck your idea of balance and fairness is, because to everyone but the ancients, it really feels like none of that applies to Colas. And he goes, that is not the case, and she calls bullshit. And Aiden goes, does Colas strike you as someone who is happy with their lot in life fulfilled? And Aiden says, Colas was not always like how he is now. He was not without his flaws, but he was once fair and gentle. Colas was feared while his brother was welcomed, dreaded while Ethos was celebrated, isolated and lonely when his twin was surrounded by many. And while the other primals could enter the mortal realm and spend time among them to retain some semblance of humanity, he could only do so for short periods and without interaction to avoid spreading death. He is the true primal of death, and mortals have never been able to come to terms with the knowledge that everything that begins must end. A millennium of that changed him, while many others are unable to see that. You have been able to. Twins. Oh, some shit's gonna go down with Malik, whichever version of that in Iris. We're gonna get some twin. We're gonna get some twin.
Wait, I'm so confused. How did that
Because Colas and Ethos. I was drawing a parallel. Sorry, my brain went to parallel to the
we have
next
Addis
set of
and
twins.
Kin as twins too.
Yeah, but Kin's a jackass. That's not.
People could say Malik kind of was too.
Yeah, but it's not the same bloodline. It's not the same. It's not the same path. It's not the same
That's
direction.
Fair. But here we go, guys. We talked about this in the last episode. How she has her moments.
Well, yeah, because when you read...
No, I know.
Anyway.
I know. She's done with my
And then
shit.
Aiden goes, and that is no excuse for what he has done to others and you, but he has not gone unpunished, Seraphina. Anything he has ever wanted or needed has been kept from him or eventually taken away. Which I'm confused, because by the end of this book, we know that the star is being kept safe. We'll get to that later. And then that's taken. But Colas is also safe. Like, not safe, but he's, like, entombed.
Yeah.
So then I'm... Like, how is this balance is my question. Like, how does this ultimately mean balance? Or
The
is this
embers of death are still in existence, but he's not.
I don't... See, this whole thing doesn't make sense.
They can't kill him because they can't kill the embers. They can't use the star to transfer the embers because Satoria's in it.
Yeah, but, like, why... I mean, I understand why for the plot, but, like, I just don't understand why it had to be taken at the end of this book. From them, for holding... Like, maybe...
Why did they not take it sooner?
Or just...
I think the
I'm
fates
not
needed
even
them to
sure.
deal with Colas first.
I don't know. The fates are sussy.
There's
I don't know.
something
That's all I
going
gotta
on.
say.
Yeah.
And she asks how long she has to kind of answer, and Aiden goes, it's customary to give a full moon cycle, which is a month. And she asks, so you said that preventing a war was a thread not seen. Has that changed? And Aiden laughs and says, if it had, I could not tell you, and you know that. And she asks, should I have just accepted his offer? And Aiden goes, did instinct tell you to do so? And she shook her head, and he says, then that's all that matters. Which is why, like, I'm confused if I'm supposed to be on his side or not.
It's like that parent that doesn't want to give their kids answers because they want to figure things out. And they're like, just trust yourself. It's like, yo, you can give them some more guidance than that. Thank you.
This is my thing, is there's also the sense of maybe, possibly, potentially, this wouldn't make sense either. But I feel like there's some intervention within the fates too. Like, I feel like, maybe not Aiden, but I feel like someone intercepts the different calls to kind of not cater, but like to steer the ship in a specific direction,
They
kind of
send
thing.
the fate who needs to be there in that moment for whatever's going on.
Like, they're just weird. This is just sus.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say about that.
They're like, no, don't send Holland. He would guide her through this. Send someone who's going to be vague and not give her much to go off of.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so we move into chapter 20. Aiden returned her with warning, this time to the Shadowlands. She, is getting comforted by Ash and asked, like, what happened, essentially, and she tells him that he was just being an asshole. Some of his abilities, like the psychic, have returned to him, but I'm okay, I swear. Shocker, downplaying her trauma again. And she's like, I'm guessing you didn't leave for Valley. And he's like, I think you know the answer to that. And then she asks Nexus if he had to sit on Ash to keep him here. And Nexus is like, pretty much. For a moment there, I didn't think I would be able to stop him. And she's like, I'm sorry. I know it's not my fault, but I'm sure this couldn't have been easy for you. And he says it wasn't. Do you need anything? Food? Something to drink? And she goes, I wasn't gone that long. And he says, any length of time is too long.
I love it.
And then Rain comes in, and he goes, if you're looking for the fate, he vanished the moment Nyktos reached you. And she goes, well, that's probably for the best. By the way, he now thinks I'm the calm one out of the two of us. And Rain chokes. And he's like, how so? And she goes, I sort of might have killed Callum twice. And Nectus snorts while Rain wipes at his mouth with the back of his hand. And Ash pulls her into his lap, and she felt a small jolt of unease and shuts it down. And she goes, I would not allow my fucked up mind to do this to me, to us. I liked being this close to Ash, and it wasn't that long ago that he abhorred the touch of another. This openness between us was too important for me to ruin.
So a little PTSD moment there.
Yeah, I understand her fear. I genuinely do, but to see this is really like I wish she would lean on him like
Mhm.
he like his arms are open, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not I feel like he's really helped reassure her and at every turn and I just wish she would lean into that. Obviously she's not ready to and that's clear, but this just
Just seeing
hurts
it
my
from
heart.
an outside perspective makes you wish that, like,
It was slightly different,
yeah.
yeah. And then he kind of just asks what happened or what happened and she just was like he just annoyed me. Um and he was like, "Did anyone else annoy you?" And she was like, "Yes." And she thought of Ken. She was like, "But none met the same fate." And she goes, "Colas looked like shit, by the way." And they're like, "What do you mean?" His abilities are stronger, but I don't think he's fully recovered. He moved slowly, looked thinner. There were shadows under his eyes and below his cheekbones. And Rain was confused, and he was like, "He should at least appear physically well by now. Man, you must have really done a number on him." And Ash is like, "She did." And then she talks about the deal. And she says he'd let us live out our lives, but the others would have to be punished, and he would rule as the primal of death. And Ash goes, "Well, what did he want in return?" And she goes, "Satoria." And everyone's just like, "That's all he wanted?" And she's like, "All? Yes, all he wants is the woman he got killed, brought back to life, assaulted, stalked." And Ash is just like, Rain meant no offense, because she really is so protective of Satoria. And like, I don't. It's crazy because of the, like, it's not even a bond. It's just, I mean, I guess it's a trauma bond, but like, it's
Yeah.
just not
I
like
think
a
that's
Noda.
purely
It's
what it
not
is,
like,
really, is a trauma bond.
ugh, fucking wild, to be honest with you. Um, and she tells them that he knows Satoria's soul isn't in her and where it is. And she tells them that she didn't accept the deal. And Nectus goes, "I don't think any of us believed you would." And Ash is like, "Well, why do you sound uncertain of this decision?" And she says, I didn't have a chance to accept or reject it, and I'll get to that in a moment. But before we entered Core Palace, Aiden told me that preventing war among the primals was not seen in any of the threads, but that I guess everything from my birth to my ascension kept snipping threads, ending some and changing others. It gave me the impression that I, or the choices I helped make, could possibly prevent war. And he warned me that a war among the primals would disturb the ancients who'd gone to ground. And Ash goes, "Disturbing them is not the same as waking them." And she goes, "It's not, but I think it would make them more likely to waken." He also said that the war wouldn't be won until there was blood and bone. Sorry,
Sorry.
just choking a little bit. I don't know why that's that. And Ash is like, "What does that mean?" And she's like, "I don't know." And he wasn't into explaining things. Maybe he meant in a figurative sense, like the war wouldn't be won until there was life and death. But that doesn't really make sense. Unless he meant in the sense for a war to end, the primals of life and death must come together to no longer be at odds with each other. And Ash is like, "That's not going to happen." And she goes, "But by refusing to give him Satoria, I'm choosing one person over potentially thousands, if not more." And Nectus goes, "If one life isn't important enough, then no lives are." Interesting thought, because it's very much like if you're in a burning building and you could save one loved one or 5 strangers, who would you save? Food for thought.
You're supposed to pick the 5 strangers.
Correct. And Ash
Beth,
says
if
it's not.
you could save me or 5 strangers, who would you save?
Ash says it's not just that. There's no way
Bitch.
he will honor the deal once he gets what he wants. And Aiden, as she's running through this whole thing. And then she gets into what she went to offer, and she was like, the first thought was to offer him nothing, but that didn't seem what it seemed like what a true primal of life would do. So,
She's so caught up on what a true primal of life would do.
mhm,
It's so interesting.
correct.
Like, she's not thought about, like, what she wants to do. She's thought about, like, what do I, as the primal of life, have to do? Not just what do
Correct.
I, Sarah, have to do. Yeah.
Well, she's also in this protective state, which goes into this whole, I thought about Satoria's soul and how I couldn't do that to her, even for a chance to ensure our safety, and I would do anything for that, anything but that. And I realized that if one life is that important, then how can the lives of gods and mortals not be more important than our vengeance, our anger? It can't be that way. And she's all like, say something, people. And
Say
Ash is like,
something. Sorry.
are we role reversing this episode? Anyway, Ash goes, you really truly believe that Colas doesn't want war? And she's like, I know you think my opinion is influenced by how he acted when he believed I was Sotoria, but even before that, the very first time I spoke to him in Dalos, he didn't speak of war. Instead, he spoke of killing all the primals who stood against him. How is that not war? And she's like, I see what you're saying, but I think he was running his mouth, wanting to scare me. And I'm not saying his plan to kill those who stood against him changed, not even when he believed I was Sotoria. Later, he spoke of giving them the choice to stand with him instead of flat out killing them. Yeah, that's not much of an option, but he also knew that most primals would not go against him if he rose as a primal of blood and bone. And Ash is like, Colas says a lot, Sarah. And she's like, I know, he's aware of his limitations, and I think he knows how tenuous his hold would become if another challenged his power. He absolutely hated when I used the ether around him, and I don't think it was because he was afraid of me or anything like that. And she's just like, it's more than just his ego. I think it was because he didn't want anyone to see that I could challenge him. And Ash asks, how does that have nothing to do with his ego? And she's like, look, I don't think Colas is responsible when it comes to anything that doesn't line up with what he wants. I don't think Colas is reasonable. Sorry. But he knows what war would do to the realms. He doesn't want to rule over a pile of bones. He will seek to prevent that, which is, in his own shitty way, he's trying to do. If there's a sliver of chance that he will abdicate the throne, how can we not pursue that? Honestly valid. Then they're talking about entombing him. And Ash is like, even if that peace comes with a threat looming over our heads, do we want to live like that? And Nexus is like, that's what your father would have chosen. And Ash is just like, and look where that got him. Well, listen, it's not a he said, she said, pick one, pick the other. Listen. And essentially they end up just going as planned. They're going to summon the primals, gain their support, and things are going to continue the way that they've been. Which, honestly, this is a very convoluted long section of this chapter of them going back and forth to end up back at the square one. And Ash agrees with Rain, and then she agrees with Ash, who's agreeing with Rain. And Ash is going to head to Vati in the morning and to let Attis know about the deals. And we all know how Attis feels. I think it's beautiful that he could love Satoria, but also love Lila in this, not at the same time, but still
Right.
manage that relationship or that bond.
Yeah.
But Sarah is now it's just her and Ash, and she's asking if he's mad at her, and he's like, what? And she's like, because of the deal I offered, or are you disappointed? And he's like, I'm not mad, nor am I disappointed. But she's like, but you're feeling something about it, and he's mainly frustrated. And she's like, with me? And he says a little, but mostly with myself. And she's like, why? And he goes, because instead of spending time threatening their array and then fucking, I should have been thinking. I mean, honestly accurate, very self-aware. We love that about him.
We do.
And he goes, if I had stopped for a moment to think about it, I would have realized there was a chance that Colas would pull something like this. I could have prepared you for having to make an offer. We would have talked it through. And she's like, could have, would have. I hated those words. She says, I don't think any of us believed Colas would demand a meeting or offer a deal. And he goes, but I know him. I should have expected this. From the moment we met in the Garden District, you have always been the stab first and ask questions later type, in both the figurative and literal senses. You'll strike first before anyone else can get the upper hand. You're not one to give many a chance. And she's like, I can't deny that. And he goes, that's changed. And he goes, I don't think that's how a queen would behave. Or she says, I don't think that's how a queen would behave. And he goes, well, how does a queen behave then, Sarah? She's like, I don't know, but lashing out and potentially worsening the situation probably isn't it. Honestly, not wrong.
But it could be.
Yeah, but so in the same token, like, she's too busy trying back to what you said. She's too busy trying to be what she thinks a queen should be versus just
Yeah.
being the truest, most authentic version of herself.
Right.
Or she's like picking and choosing because it's very much like I want to talk in the crowd versus standing on a throne. But then she's just like, I'm gonna maybe be more logical and not be step first, ask later. Like it's
And everyone's like,
very
who are you?
flip floppy. Exactly. Um and um she essentially they agree that they're not gonna accept the deal. And
But they're not going to say that yet.
yeah, and then he continues, are we going to let him run around, trust that he will keep to his word? And essentially they agree that that's not really what they want. She wants to make him bleed and dance in his blood. I want to fucking hurt him, and if I could
Yeah, you
kill
do.
him, that is what I want. And she's like, but does that make us better than him? I don't know if it does or doesn't, but if a war comes, I don't want it to be us who starts it. Honestly valid. Even if the threat of disturbing the ancients wasn't at stake, I don't want there to be war at all. And Ash agrees with her. And she's like, you don't, but you have been building an army and taking the necessary steps. You were probably preparing for war before I was born. I haven't been. I haven't been preparing for any of this. And I just did what I thought was right.
That's
And
one of
Ash
those
is like, I
moments where
don't.
it's like, please don't remind us of the age difference between these characters.
Honestly, that's kind of hilarious to think about. And he's like, I don't think what you did was wrong. And he apologizes if he thinks that he gave that impression. He just also says, like, it's almost like you trust him. And she's like, I don't trust him. And he's like, okay, that was the wrong word choice. It's more like you're giving him credit that he does not deserve. I know you believe he doesn't want war, but as long as I've known Colas, he only wanted two things, Victoria and to rule. His fear of harming you while taking the embers of life only held him back, slowed him down. His plans never changed. His love for Sotoria, as twisted as it is powerful, but not as much as his thirst for power and search for retribution against those he believes wronged him. She's like, I hope you're wrong. And he's like, so do I, because the Colas I know would choose to see the realms burn before he relinquished control, and we should prepare for that.
Yes, we should.
I mean, I get it, but also, like, I get it. I really do. But, like, she's really trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, which he doesn't deserve.
The problem is she's doing what Ethos did, is giving him the credit where it's not.
And she doesn't even know him really.
Yeah.
Ugh, Sarah, please.
It's frustrating from an outside perspective to see, and I get a lot of her wanting to believe that is her trauma and the stuff that she's probably latching on, hoping that something that happened while she was there is true, but it's not. Colas is just
It's a key character flaw, but like it is what it is.
Yeah, but chapter 21 starts out strong with Sarah holding a sword to Cars, basically threatening him to try to get him to train with her, saying, you offered to train me before, and he was like, that was before. And she's like, what? I'm the queen, I'm the primal of life, Nyktos would beat you up, like stuff like that, not really giving him a chance to talk, but basically trying to be like, you said you do this, let's do this. And he's like, no, that's not why. And we find out that Reaver can tell you're lying by your smell. Because he says he's lying, I can smell it. And they're both kind of like, what? And Reaver says it's in his sweat. The stench changes. And Carr says, what the fuck?
Could you imagine having your, like, emotions, like, felt red by your sweat? Just saying.
No, I could not. Especially I'd be like, I'm not even sweating. What do you mean? But he says, what the fuck? And Sarah says, language. There are younglings present. And he said, 5 minutes ago, you shouted that very same word. And she goes, I did not. And he says, really? Basically what's going on for the next little bit is they're arguing about wanting to train. Reaver's eating apples, a lot of apples apparently, talking about how he can tell they're lying by the sweat. he says that Kars's sweat becomes more like the scent becomes more bitter. And Reaver says none of them are gonna fight you. They're worried what Nyktos will do. And then Reaver says someone needs to fight with her because if not, she's gonna start pacing again. Because she worries a lot, even though she'll say she doesn't. So Reaver's out here dropping truths and giving them weird facts about drinking.
Accurate.
In the distance, Jadis is being Jadis. She has some silk that they don't know where she got it from. She said, I didn't need Reaver pointing out every time I lied. Perhaps you should assist with Jadis. And he said, I'd rather not. She'll want to eat all my apples. And apparently she always wants to eat his apples. And that Nex said you can never eat too many apples. There's a lot of apples going on in this chapter. Scion appears and kind of saves Kars, saying, I heard that there's damage you wanted to do. And he said, walk with me. And she's like, sure. Kars is looking relieved, and he tells her, you can leave the sword. She kind of gives up and puts the blade in the grass. Kars pivoted and ran basically to where the rest of the guards were. And Scion kind of gently tells her, like, hey, yo, you would hurt him. You would hurt any of us if you trained with us. And she was like, I wouldn't hurt him. And he's like, well, not on purpose. You brought the life back to the Shadowlands overnight. That's how powerful you are. And that kind of power will also affect you physically. You don't know your own strength. That will take you a bit to learn. The same goes for a god once they complete their ascension. Even Nyktos didn't train with gods for a while after completing his ascension. He had to make sure he fully understood his strength. What feels like a soft blow to him is like a sucker punch through the gut to one of us, and that's not an exaggeration. One hit from you, the true primal life, and you would have likely broken Kars's arm. And so she's like, oh, well.
My bad.
Whoops. And she's basically saying, like, Ethos doesn't rely on essence. None of you guys do. She wants to keep up with what she knows, and it's been so long since she had that part. She needs something to do, because they're not doing anything in this moment of, what is it? This moment of peace? Like,
Solitude?
neutral...
Quiet.
No, this moment of, like, with the deal. I don't know the word for it, but I'm trying to think of, like, the word for it. It's like this truce they have at the moment.
Decision-making stage, processing period.
Yeah, all those words. Where she can't do anything with the primals and stuff at the moment. She's like, I need to do something. Reaver's getting tired of me pacing. I'm getting tired of pacing. I want to get back to what I know. So she's having a hard time not being able to do
Adjustment
that.
period.
No,
Adjustment
that's not
period.
what I was looking for at all.
And I'm going to say adjustment period. Still an adjustment period.
I'm not talking about, like, her being ascended. I'm talking about the deal between her and Colas being on pause. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, but he says Nyktos will train for you. He enjoys getting his ass kicked by you.
True.
And she thanks him for stopping her and says she needs to apologize to Kars. And then he's realizing that I was thinking you've changed, you're not so irrational. He's like, but then I realized you weren't always irrational, just prone to moments of irrationality. And she's like, if this is a compliment, you're failing. And he's like, you've always been thoughtful, though, considerate of others. I don't think we always saw that, except for Hector. And that's, Hector. And then Jadis comes hopping on her hind legs. Eos and Belle had come out, and Jadis, you found out that the strip that Jadis has is from Eos's dress. And she's now sputtering flames towards Belle and causing chaos. It's just chaotic outside. And Sarah says, children, Draken or not, are absolutely terrifying. And he says that they are. By the way, I have a reason I came for you. Rain is looking for you. And he said it's important.
It's always
But guess
important
what?
with Rain.
It was not important.
No.
Not to Sarah. So she's basically falling asleep on him. What she wanted was to talk about the day-to-day functions of the palace. And that is not what she had thought would be important. Basically, they're looking for someone to help run things. In the past, it had been basically Eos and Ector who took care of the maintenance of the place where they lived. But he thinks that now things are changing and she's the true primal of life. They should bring in staff and actually like liven up the place and treat it how it should have been treated all this time. Niktos never really focused on those areas. He didn't think it was safe for people to be there. And it was time that they think they should change that. And they decided to give Eos a lot of power in making those decisions because it was something that she would enjoy doing and something that she had helped with for a while. And they want to start bringing staff in and they say as long as the Niktos is okay with it, but they do decide not to let anyone live there until things with Colas are taken care of, and they're not using the big words because Reaver is there and they don't want to say things like killed in front of him.
Which is funny considering
it's Reaver.
You know.
Yep. And but yeah, so they want to get things settled before people live there. And then Rain says that she kind of like she's been in and out of focus this whole time, and he says, "Look, I know you probably have a lot of stuff on your mind, and this feels like the last thing you need to be considering right now." And she's like, "I wouldn't say it's the last thing, but yes, I do have a lot on my mind." And he offers her someone to talk to. He says, if he's like, I'm being honest and serious. If there's someone you need to talk to, I'm here. Like sometimes just talking it out helps." He says, so I feel, he says, maybe you can focus if you get out whatever is on your mind, though I feel focusing isn't one of your strong suits. And then, as she does, she asks, as her and Poppy do, she asked a random question asking about his power, the telepathy. Do you always need to have an item belonging to the person, or do you need to be like touching them or something? And he's like, well, that was random. But he says, yes, I need a token or to be in contact with them. And she asks what token of Niktos he has. And he shows her a medallion that he carries. And her foresight kind of takes over, and she realizes that Rain himself made that medallion. And Rain, and then she realizes that he also made the box that is on Niktos's Ash's nightstand. And he was like, how did you know that? And he said, foresight. And he's like, oh, I forgot. Do me a favor. Don't use it on me. And she's like, I wasn't planning to. And he's like, you just did. And she says, look, sometimes things come to me and I don't have control over it. But on a boundary note, I really don't try to like force it. And that's one thing she's always been serious about. So he's basically like, yo, let's have some boundaries around that thing. And then he asked her, what else were you thinking about? And she's like, oh, everything. And the meeting with the primals. And they're talking. So they start talking about that. And he's like, there's one more thing I didn't mention before regarding the meeting with the primals. Yesterday, you did amazing during your speech. I have every belief that you'll do the same with the primals as long as you keep your temper in check. And she was like, why would my temper be incited? And he said, does it need a reason? So basically, he's calling her out on her temper. And she's starting to get antsy, sitting in there and being in there with Rain. And she knows where the conversation can go. And so she's like, I need to do something queenly right now. And Reaver says, I hope it's not more pacing. And she's sitting there thinking, like, she's like, I was queen. I was able to do this great primal power. And then she's like, wait, great primal power. Cola said there's a whole other part, something about great power stumbling and falling. It was about the primal of life and death. And Reaver says no such primal exists, and she's like, right, I totally forgot about that supposedly unknown part of the prophecy, the third part, the end. That wasn't seen by Penelope, but dreamt by the ancients. And this is when she kind of realizes that she is the true primal of life. She can summon a fate if she wants to, and so she tries to summon Holland. She's like, Holland, I need to speak with you, please. Like, she's just talking to the air, and Reaver's just kind of watching. They're hoping something happens, and then she realizes her hearing is finally improving because she hears someone come to the door, and it's Rahar and Kars, and he calls her Majesty, and he's like, look, it's either that or me, Eliasa, one or the other. And she's like, does it have to be that way? And he said, Colas is greeted as such out of fear, and because he demands it. We address you as such because it is owed, deserved.
I love them.
I love
so
them.
much.
Yeah. But he says some visitors are quite. So another guard came in and they said there's visitors, and they're insistent that they speak with her. And she's expecting it to be Holland, but it's the goddess Penelope and a man named Ward. And we love that. We're excited. He's back.
So excited.
Her summons worked, kind of. It's just not who she was hoping for.
Correct. Unfortunately.
Penelope and Victor, or I'm gonna call him Victor. I think calling him Ward is weird.
I don't disagree. Go forth, my child. Go forth.
Thank you. They come in and she takes a look at Victor, and she's like, you were created. Like, she looks at him and she suddenly knows
everything about
him. And that's kind of what this chapter goes into a lot of detail about.
Bless
to get
the
that
devs.
background on Victor and what he did to be made a victor and start that line of protectors. She says, the ancients created you. You were once mortal, but then you died, and the fates rewarded you. They created something entirely new out of you. The victors were something otherworldly, like the riders, neither god nor mortal, alive nor dead. But he was different. He was never reborn. So all these victors who are protectors, they go down, they forget their past lives, and they just kind of know what they need to do. Victor, the true Victor, however, he was never reborn like that. Because he was restored by the array. So his lives in the mortal realm, they're all fabrications. They're lies that he tells because he keeps his memories. And he's older than most of the gods. Which is crazy. It's just crazy. And it's heartbreaking at the same time that you learn that he has all of his memories when he's with Poppy. Anyways, and we get the background. We realize that she's trying to get the background on where he was, and she's like, Ronan, Leslie, there's no way. And he says, I can explain, or at least try to. Many, many years ago, when I was mortal, a queen of a fledgling kingdom, the Vadina?
I say Vadina.
Isles? Vadina Isles. I think that's what I said too. He says, the queen knighted me and I pledged to protect and serve her. I did so without hesitation. But her marriage was one of convenience, one to strengthen ties with other kingdoms. However, the king was already in love with another, a daughter of an aging bookkeeper, and the queen was aware. She had her own, and they look at Reaver, and it's like, she had her own suitors. But everything changed when a babe began to grow in the mistress's belly, one who was the illegitimate child of the king of Vadina. The queen had yet to provide an heir, so she ordered the death of her husband's mistress, and therefore their unborn child. Unfortunately, something common in that time. Because she feared that she would be unable to produce an heir, and that this illegitimate child would have a right to the throne, even if it wouldn't be easy. And he said, as a knight, I delivered my fair share of death, but not to a woman and children. Others she could have gone to would have no such qualms, so the short of it is I committed treason. I went to the bookkeeper's daughter, warned her of the threat, and protected her until the babe was born. But she was unique for the time. She had no interest in simply being protected. She wanted to learn how to ensure her own safety. I taught her how to do that.
Mm.
I know. It's
The parallels. The parallels.
and then the
Anyway.
queen learned of the betrayal. And let's see. The babe survived, so did the mother. And he says, that's all that mattered. And she's like, I don't think that's all that mattered. He's like, but it is, for the bookkeeper's daughter eventually became queen of Vadina. And he said, she asked what happened to the first queen, and he says, knowing the queen would not stop until her child was dealt with, the bookkeeper's daughter slipped into the palace one night, and well, no one exactly knows what transpired, but come morning, the queen was dead. And she's like, gee, I wonder what happened. And he said, I believe I have may have been too successful in my training.
Yeah,
Either way, the bookkeeper's daughter was the first non-noble to be placed on the thrones. Her son, Ronan, eventually ruled Vidina, and the throne passed down through the family for centuries. It was the bloodline Ronan's birth began and then ended with the last king, Leslie, who only had a daughter, a princess married to... He wasn't able to say the rest. After the marriage, King Leslie was overthrown by the lords of the Vidina Isles, and the new king was installed. That is what I heard. You may know who that princess was, who she became. And she said, I do, my mother. He says, but you're wrong about the name of Ronan's mother. She was called Fena. But that was the pet name the king called her. Her full name was Seraphina. Oh, Sophina. Your namesake. And she said, I didn't know my mother named me after her. And then he asked, did you know what Seraphina became known as? And she said no. And he said, the Silver Knight, the warrior queen who fought alongside her husband and her people in battle. Her name, even now, is synonymous with honor and duty, a name that was never repeated throughout the annals of time until Calliope, the once princess of Vedina, named her only daughter such. And that is why I was rewarded all those years. Let me just finish this. That's why I was rewarded all those years ago by saving her and Ronan. I ensured that another bearing her name would eventually be born, one that would usher in great change. Okay, go.
Her name even now is synonymous with honor and duty, a name that was never repeated throughout the annals of time until Calliope. This is literally history repeating itself.
Yep. Because no one's going to utter her name until Poppy.
I think the name Seraphina is cursed, respectfully, but continue.
I know. Poppy and Cass, please never name your children Seraphina. Yeah. Oh, and so he tells this whole story, and then Penelope goes, may I rise now? So they're still bowing. Poor freaking Victor and Penelope through this whole thing are bowing. So that sets a whole new image in your mind of how this story was told.
Oh my God.
And she's like, oh gods, yes, I'm sorry. And she says, no need to apologize. I see the primal foresight is developing in you. So we learned the background of Victor and how him saving who he did led to Sarah being born, honestly, because that is her family, her mother's bloodline.
And then he gets placed with a descendant and trains her as he once did Seraphina the OG.
Yep. Oh,
And then
he knows all of these memories. Shut up.
bloody
Why do you have to add that part?
Because it was like top 5 most tragic deaths in book history.
It was so tragic, but Jennifer released a spoiler of him. He will be in the next book. Anyways,
Well, yeah, knowing that he has memories and he goes into this like other place and It was definitely
Honestly,
possible.
it makes reading this book, whenever I do a reread next, it's going to be that much more tragic knowing all the information I know about Victor, truly. Ugh. Penelope says you may wonder why we've come, and she tells her that before they tried to summon Holland, they felt a ripple of power, of life, and they knew it came from her. But they were still unprepared to see what they did about the Shadowlands and how much life had been brought to it. They'd never seen that in the Shadowlands before. And she says it's not what death is supposed to be. It's always been a place of beauty, even in its darkest corners. Part of me feared I would never see the Shadowlands as it was before, but you restored it. It's just... And she's like, I assumed Holland sent you, and he said he was unable to answer, but hoped we may be of aid. And she was kind of annoyed by that.
Sus.
To be fair. And they do the hostess things of getting refreshments and everything like that. And
and then she dies.
I had a coughing fit. And they already know about her meeting with Colas, and we find out that Empress told her about it, and Empress is confident that Colas could quell any notion of an uprising. And they tell her about the deal and what's going on. And Penelope says an attempt for peace must always be tried. And they wondered if they knew it was possible about the Ascension. And she said, I'd hoped Nyktos would find a way to ensure you lived while also keeping Colas from achieving what he wanted. But did I know? No. There was never even a primal who was born mortal. I still hoped, even after learning that Nyktos had his cardia removed, that you two were destined, fated, and heartmates. And she's like, it's the only way that any of this would be possible. And if Holland knew it's not something he shared with me, he wouldn't have been able to, even if he wanted to. Can you imagine being in a relationship with a fate man? That'd be annoying.
Especially if he ends up being a villain.
Penelope. Anyway, she says, I know what the fates are. They're ancients. And they made the rules. And she's like, that doesn't mean they can break them. And she's like, and who would punish them for doing so? Who would stop them from changing the rules? And please call me Sarah. And she's like, if only you knew how many times I asked them those same questions. It took many years for me to understand what truly occurred when they created the primals to establish the balance of power. There's that word again.
Shocker.
In doing so, certain rules were established, once forged in the very essence that fills the realms. Rules that became the air that is breathed, the water that is drunk, and the fruits of the soil that is harvested. When those rules are broken, the realms know. I had to see that for myself to understand. And she said and Sarah asked when Colas stole the embers, and she said it wasn't the array who acted to restore the balance. The very essence itself did. That's so weird. That there's something beyond a person that can have that kind of control.
Yeah, well, it's a group of people, really.
Yeah.
It's a behemoth. It's a mammoth.
Paxton, our little human friend who likes to play with Jadis, came in and brought them their refreshments. They're picking up on the fact that he's mortal. Hi, Paxton. How he pickpocketed Nyktos, and that's how he got the job. And she gets back to going on with on. She's like, did Holland know why I tried to summon him? And she says he had an idea. It might have to do with the prophecy. That's why he asked me to come. And then she's like,
sus. I'm sus on that. I'm like,
how did he know?
I get it. Yeah, dude.
How did he know? And she's like, may I be frank? You seem angry that Holland didn't answer. And she basically said she was. She thought she could summon the fates when she wanted to. And And Ward said, Victor said when they do when there's and that they would answer, and he said they do when there's a reason to. And she says having a question's not a good enough reason. And Penelope says that you summoned Holland when you could have summoned any fate. If Holland had answered, it could have been seen as him showing you favor.
Whatever.
And she's like, so if I summoned any old array, he could have answered. That's, and Penelope says, ridiculous? Yes, I agree. But he wanted to, he truly did. So she's having to deal with that. The Fate's, it's hard because he's like family to her, but he's also a Fate, and it's a weird dynamic. The Fates, ugh.
Gotta read Fall of Wrath and Ruin and Wrath.
Do we though? Yes, we do.
Anyways, to be more deeply disappointed in the ancients, yes.
Yeah. You know he walks a fine line with you. The others know this too. He's very fond of you, Sarah, and he was overjoyed when he learned your ascension. It brought him to tears. I want to be moved by that, but I'm too suspicious these days.
Accurate.
And she's like, I know he cares for me. It's just he feels like part of the family I had from my life before. And she misses them. She misses him. And then she's like, enough of that. I learned something about the prophecy while I was in Deos. And that's when we learned that he knew more about the prophecy than Penelope did. And Penelope's like, that doesn't make sense. He questioned me thoroughly about it. And she finds out that's because Colas just wanted to know what she knew to make sure she didn't know about the whole thing. She's like, it's good you didn't. Ward is right. I got the impression that if others knew about it, he wanted to make sure you didn't know the complete version, and it was a good thing you didn't. Ward is right. I got the impression that others knew of it and might be no more, including the last Oracle born and Ethos. Yeah. And she says, are you saying there's more to what the ancients dreamed? And she said, according to Colas, there is. And they talk about the parts of the prophecy, and they're talking about the part that's specifically kind of like in her title about being bathed in the flame of the brightest moon, and that makes her Penelope think of Keela, and she's like, it's something she said during your coronation. She reacted strongly to the title Nyctos gave you, especially the brightest moon part, and that's when Sarah remembers her talking about it. And she says, clearly the part references you, the bearer of two crowns, the rightful heir to Lysania, and you as the consort, and that's what Colas believes. And they're talking about the part about great power will stumble and fall, and those left standing will tremble as they kneel, will awaken as they become forgotten. For finally, the primal of life rises, the giver of blood and the bringer of bone, the primal of blood and ash. She said that's not the whole thing, but it's the general gist of it. And he thinks it's about him, that he'll be the great power to stumble and fall. And Penelope's just like staring, and they're like, are you all right? And Penelope says, he says that that's the end of the prophecy. And she says, yes. And she says, he's wrong.
Is he though?
He is technically. It's just because it's in the wrong order. For them, it's in the wrong order.
Yeah, for us,
and from Blood and Ash, it was the right order, but yeah.
Which is so funny that it was also split up, and from Blood and Ash cracks me up every time when I think about that.
Well, I went back and I was going to do a comparison of like the prophecy they know and the correct order of the prophecy, and I went into from Blood and Ash, and I realized that when Victor talks to Tawny, he gives them the prophecy in the correct order that Keela gives it to them. So
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Blood and Ash, they knew it. Correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then we get the clarification in the next chapter, which is going to be the next episode. Because cliffhangers. Why not? Y'all hate us probably, but you know, it's fine.
Hey, we did it again. 4 chapters. Look at us go.
I know, I try. So chapter 23, we'll pick back up part 6, part 7, part 6.
Part 6. You literally have it right there on the chapter notes.
Correct. I kind of blipped it out.
You literally just wrote it.
Anyway, I really did.
Sipping and bitching on everything. I'm taking your words.
Join us on Discord. If you're interested in following my trips, my personal my personal Instagram is also linked on our page. I'm finding a lot of gamers and a lot of theme parkers in my worlds of books. So
If you guys are ever interested in us streaming a game and talking about books and stuff, we have a Twitch as well. We haven't talked about doing it, but I'm putting it out there in case someone wants us to do that. So
also fair. That really means I have to dust off my streaming self. Anyway,
it's
sipping, bitching,
motivation
all
to
the
get
things.
her going.
Thanks for tuning in, y'all, and we'll catch you later, bitches.
Bye.